Hey everyone, guess a minute or two to sign in to talk. Hey everyone, we're today we're going over RFID, NFC, smart cards, basically everything that you would find in your in a plastic card in your wallet, and how it works, how it's secured, and how we can try and break some of it. So, starting off with Matt, be going over bag stripe and a bit about the smart cards that are in your typical payment.
Right, thank you. So I am, as you said, Matt. And like you said, I'm gonna go over just some of the basics of the actual hardware we're looking at before he gets into some of the more technical stuff, and we can see a little bit what's going on with this. So first, we have the magnetic stripe card, and this is technology that's been around since the '60s, so it's pretty old stuff. Anybody with a card in their wallet knows what this is. You just take that look at it. It's a black stripe down the card, obviously. Um, and it's the same technology that has been used in cassette tapes, so really ancient stuff. It's static data, unchanging, and the data is encrypted, unlike the EMV chip, which we talk about a little more coming up. Um, yeah, so okay, what is a smart card? Smart cards, they normally contain an embedded microprocessor to replace the magnetic stripe on the card. The microprocessor enforces access to data on the card, making it more secure than magnetic stripes. They get their power from the card reader when inserted. So, I mean, obviously, they don't have like little batteries in them or anything. They get their power when they're inserted into a device, and that device feeds it power. And these smart cards are used for credit cards, e-cash, and wireless communication like SIM cards. Again, if you have cards in your wallet, pull one out and you'll see we're talking about that chip and you can look in the image. It's the top left chip in the card. Uh, yeah. Okay, so here's a good picture of it, so you can see how it's embedded in there a little bit better. This is just like a side view of a card, and then the top left is an image of the actual chip itself that you guys will probably see in your cards. Okay, so there's two main classifications of these smart cards, and I mean they break down more than this as well. But these are two classifications that I like to look at. They are contact versus contactless. So for contact smart cards, the card needs to be physically inserted into the card reader, make contact with the card reader. Again, those cards are ATM cards, SIM cards, like in your cell phones, or credit cards, which goes back to kind of ATM cards in a way. So for contactless, though, um, the card doesn't actually need to be inserted to exchange data. It's like the NFC and RFID stuff. You'll see those little tags on a lot of the cards, and maybe your phone that you use for transactions where you don't physically have to touch items to do the transaction. Um, and let's see, as it says here, it uses near field communication radio frequencies to establish wireless communication between the chip and card reader. So cool stuff, especially with COVID. All right, EMV. I want to say that's kind of like how I think of it, at least, is like a protocol, just like a method of the communication, how the data is organized. But it stands for I could be wrong on that, but it stands for Europay, Mastercard, and Visa, and it's the global standard used to authenticate for smart card transactions. It encrypts the data. Remember, because the data, unlike the stripes, is no longer static. It can change. And every time the card is in use, the chip creates a unique transaction ID that is then discarded afterwards. So what that does is it helps bad actors, or it stops bad actors from stealing information from a single point of sale and reusing that information for their own transaction. So if like a man-in-the-middle attack, if a bad actor was sitting in the center of a transaction and stole all that information, they couldn't just replay it and reuse it over and over and over and over. So okay, and now it's Origami Hawk's turn, so I'm gonna send it on over to him.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go over RFID. So that's gonna be the contactless part of these smart cards, and these systems are basically they're completely independent of each other. Um, so you can have cards with both technologies, but it's gonna work the same no matter they're never linked together. Um, so RFID is obviously it's in a card. There's no battery in your card. It's completely powered by the reader. Um, Capable of what's called half duplex communication. If you're not familiar with like radio stuff, basically that means that it's two-way communication, but only one thing can talk at a time. So, for example, the reader can send a message to the card can read the message and then reply with an answer, but they can't do that simultaneously. Um, and there's three main types of RFID. There's the low frequency, which is a bit of an older technology. The high frequency is what you find with the EMV standard and NFC in your phone. All that is running on high frequency. And then in some industrial applications, you'll see a lot of ultra high frequency stuff. The main reason you would want to use a higher frequency is it generally can get a bit longer range. It just has less what's called penetrating power. So, for example, if you have a wall in the way, high frequency isn't going to go through it as well as a low frequency. Also, with the higher frequency, the reason that a lot of the more secure cards are high frequency is that they can have more power and a bit higher data rate. So we'll see that later when we get into the demo, how the two different kinds differ. As far as where RFID is used, access control systems. If you've ever been to a corporate office, you'll see people. They'll have their little badges. They'll scan into doors. Your Comet card is an RFID card. Low frequency. We'll play around with that later. You also, of course, see them with contactless payment. Passports have RFID built in. I don't know what frequency it is, but it's an ISO standard. And if you've ever been to Europe, they have like the trains going between like France and the UK. All you have to do is just tap your passport on a thing, and they'll let you straight through. A lot of international airports also use it. And of course, there's RFID for manufacturing and logistics. So if you're familiar with like aircraft, every single bolt and any part on the aircraft has to be tested and certified. So a lot of times they'll implement RFID so that they can track stuff going through the manufacturing process. And then a lot of big concerts, festivals will use RFID in their tickets, just speed things up, prevent counterfeits. Same you'll see with ski lodge lift tickets, as well as poker chips. Casinos will have RFID in every single poker chip, and that way they're able to track poker chips as they go through, who they transact to, where they can even sense where it is on the table because they'll have readers all over the table. And then of course if they get stolen, then they can just revoke them. So the fundamentals of how RFID works is, if you're if you remember in your physics class how transformer works, basically two coils next to each other, and using magnetism they transfer current and just energy. So that's essentially what RFID is. One coil is in the reader and one coil is in the card. And unfortunately I couldn't get my camera working, but you can just look up RFID coil and you'll see what it looks like. But basically, the reader is just always sending out a sine wave that's at the carrier frequency, so either that low or high frequency that I mentioned earlier. And that's what ultimately will power the card. The card will receive that, power up, and then to actually communicate, what happens is, so it stores that energy in a capacitor, and then to communicate, it shorts out that coil. And again, if you remember in your physics class, the more current that's being consumed, the voltage drops. So the reader is able to detect that, and that's how the cards communicate. Basically, it's a binary, either shorting it or not shorting it. You can also have in between states, which we'll go into right now. So on top of this like binary shorting, there's a bit more data you can get out of it. It doesn't just have to be encoded where high is 1 and low is 0. So you can have that. That's called direct modulation. But more often what you'll see for error correction and redundancy purposes is these two modulation types. So frequency shift keying and phase shift keying. They're pretty similar in what they do. Basically, it takes multiple waves to encode at 1 or 0. So for frequency shift keying, it'll be a lower frequency for 0, and then a higher frequency for a 1. So usually it's 8 pulses for a 0 within a specified amount of time, and 10 pulses for a 1 within a specified amount of time. And this time is defined by the modulation, basically the clock signal, that sine wave that's being sent out by the reader. That's what the RFID uses. And then with phase shift keying, what it does, there's 2 ways to do it, but basically what happens is it changes the phase. So you'll see it's a high, low, high, and then you see 2 lows. So that's a phase shift, 180 degrees. The reader will detect that, and you can either set it to say it shifts every time there's a 0, or have it shift only when the state changes. So it'll go it'll just be like 1, 0, and keep going 1, 0. So you get that idea. And if you guys have any questions at any point, feel free to ask. I'll try my best to answer them. So now we've gone even one step higher, and you can have different kinds of data encoding. This is just the normal stuff that you see with any kind of digital communication. Again, another layer of error checking, but it's less tied to the hardware, so you can just do this all in software. I'm not gonna go too much in depth. Basically, you have direct encoding, which is exactly what you would think. Manchester encoding, this is, I believe, the most common type. It's the one that I've run into the most, at least. And differential biphase encoding. If you guys want me to go over that later, I can come back to this slide. I also have some resources I can link. But all you need to know, basically, is it's the typical trade-off of data bandwidth versus, reliability. So, let's say you have a low frequency card. How do you attack it? Well, most low frequency cards, because they can't do very high data rates, um, are typically just sending out an ID. It's basically the same as the mag stripe. It's just it's a number that it reads off. Same as if you're typing in, your credit card number into a website. It's not any more complicated than that. Uh, there's just all the hardware behind it. So in order to do an attack on a low frequency card, all you need to do is have a reader that can read the card. Often what you can do is, if you are near a reader, you can just set up something that'll just snoop on the communication, just passively reading what's going on in the magnetic field nearby. Or you can do what is the more hackery move and build a skimmer. So if you see over here, this is a big RFID reader that you typically find in like a parking garage. So the distance that you can scan a card is much further. And then this just has a little bit of an Arduino and a bit of other hardware, so that it just logs all the data that it scans in. And all you need to do is walk up next to someone, and typically conceal the reader, and then just scan what's on them. And if they're not using any kind of blocking technology, then that'll work. And so you can also, basically, once you've read something, you can do a replay attack, which is where you just replay the communication. That's basically the same as doing an emulation, which is where you take a device and you just basically pretend that it's a card. Or you can just clone that ID to another card, because there's Chinese-made cards which you can basically program anything onto. So more interesting is the high-frequency attacks. These are, a lot more common now. Generally, like, access control systems are still stuck on low frequency. That's what UTD uses for their Comet cards and stuff. Just because it's expensive to replace all these. But high frequency cards usually are encrypted, so because they have that extra data rate, they can do a lot more. They can also have more power for the onboard chip to manage encryption. But often what you'll see is that there's like 8 or 12 default encryption keys that rarely people change. So I'll show in the demo what those look like, but a lot of times if you just grab a high frequency card and check it against the default keys, it'll decrypt no problem. Again, you can do sniffing attacks, or man in the middle attacks, where you're just if you have a reader and a card and you can sniff that traffic, there's a key exchange going on there, and you don't technically have to be in the middle, because you can just observe what's going. You can observe the key exchange going on, and then decrypt that later. But that's hard, because then you have to, post up near a reader or something. And another just nice feature of the high frequency cards, you can do challenge response, where if you're familiar with cryptography, it's basically public and private key encryption. That's what's used by EMV, and we'll poke at some of the encryption stuff later. So for the demo, I have a Breeze card, which is basically for the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, I believe. Basically Atlanta's Metro card or whatever, or DART card. And it's running a Mifare card. These are made by, I believe, NXP Semiconductor, but the Mifare cards are just super ubiquitous in public transit and even a lot of access control. But it's just they're one of the cheaper high frequency cards, so a lot of times you'll just run into them. So the Mifare cards don't use AES or any other kind of known encryption system. They use what's called Crypto 1, which is just their own proprietary encryption standard. Of course, it was secret, security through obscurity. Well, that only lasted so long. Some researchers were able to crack it open, And as it turns out, there's only 16 bits of entropy in their encryption algorithm. This diagram's a little complicated to read, but basically all you need to know is that it takes the seed and it just puts it to a bunch of different powers. These what is it? Times 11 times 13, or to the power of 11, 13, 14, 16. But at the end of the day, you only have 16 bits of entropy. That's brute forceable within like 48 hours. But, 48 hours is a long time to be standing next to someone in line. So, what what we do is, as it turns out, this encryption algorithm is pseudo-random because we can guess the seed easily. Because the seed is just determined by how long it takes for the chip to boot up. So it's a very low amount, and we'll go through and crack with the Proxmark in a second. So yeah, let's get to that demo time. Fun, right? See what breaks this time. So I'm using what's called a Proxmark 3. I was supposed to have my camera working, but there's a few different versions. This is the newer Proxmark V4. This is the OG Proxmark 3, and I have the cheap Chinese knockoff that's like $50 on eBay. That looks something like this. And you can see the low frequency coil, and then in the high frequency coil is actually built into the circuit board. But don't worry too much about the hardware. It's pretty much all the same. Like this is the go-to tool, so there's a lot of documentation about it. So now we'll get into actual hacking. Alright, so I've plugged in my Proxmark to USB, and this is just cloned from the GitHub under the client folder. Really just do /Proxmark3 and then connect to our Proxmark, which will be on a port either ACM1, 0, 1, 2, 3. So here we're connected, and if we just do help, you can see we have a few different categories of commands. Proxmark, they've kind of redesigned a lot of the code, so it's actually like reasonable to use. It used to be that you had to refer to a bunch of documentation to get like one working command, but now all we have to do is, let's say we're going to attack a low frequency card. You just hit LF, and this shows us all the different low frequency cards that we can use. There's a lot more low frequency than high frequency because high frequency is more standardized. But let's say we have a low frequency card that we have no idea what it's actually, what technology it's using. We just do LF search, and you can't see it, but this is a corporate ID for a certain big four firm located in Houston. But you can see we have an ID, and that's it. That's all we need. We now have this. This would be better with a camera, but just trust my word. I have a what's called a T5577 card, and this is just a blank white card. You can buy these off eBay, Amazon, anywhere. It's basically a card that you can program to act like any other RFID card. So since we know this is an HID prox card, and intent, you may have one in your wallet. I think it's a few more bits than this, but we can clone it. So we just go LFHID and see all the LFHID commands. And we can just do LFHID clone and put this ID in. And I think that worked. Let's find out LFHID read. So here's the original card. Okay, that not work? Alright, well, we'll do LF search. So, here's the original card. Oh, okay. Well, dumped it all there. Let's. Alright. LF search. Yeah, this is how demos work. Well, maybe the other one will work. Valid high tag. I have no idea what. Alright, we're gonna move on. But you get the idea. I've tested this before. You can also get the T5577 chips as key fobs. And I really wish my camera was working, but okay. There we go. But you can get them as key fobs and clone your card there as well. Sure. Okay, that's probably why it wasn't working. I've had a weird issue where, yeah, for some reason it changes COM ports on me. Alright, let's try this again. This is the original card. We do an LF search. Hey, there's our ID. This is a clone card. Again, we see same ID. So that's all it takes to clone a card. This will buzz you in. Ask me how I know. And you can again clone those over to little key fobs. I found that sometimes they don't show up initially, but if you just clone them anyways, then it'll fix it. So let's move on to a high frequency card. This is that Breeze card I mentioned earlier. We do a HF search. We'll see for a second or two that it doesn't find anything, because of course it doesn't. There you go. Let's see, this is a Mifare Classic 1K. 1K is the memory on the card. Here's the ID. There's some other stuff. You see no Chinese magic backdoor command detected. That means that this is a genuine card. If you want to clone this card, you'll clone it to one that has magic Chinese backdoor. And you'll also see PRNG detection weak. That's for pseudo-random number generation. Basically, that means that we can crack it with a little bit of brute force. So if we go HF, we can see all the different kinds. These are your ISO standards. This is what your EMV cards use, and you know, there's a few other standards, but a lot less. But so since we have a Mifare card, we can go HF, MF, bunch of commands available. But we just want to get into this card. So how do we get? I probably should have explained how these work. Basically, it's a big table of data, just like any kind of memory chip, where you give it an address and then you can read the data off that section. So the first thing we want to do is, well, the easiest thing to do is if we do HF, MF, where is it? Check. With a star, I believe. No. You need to specify it's a 1K, and then a question mark, all sectors. Nope. Practice this. Okay, there we go. So there's in that memory you can specify A or B. Usually most cards just use A. You can look more into that if you're curious, but for our purposes we'll just check A. So what this does is we tell it to check it. It's a 1K card. Check the A sectors, and it just checked all of the common default keys, and you'll see these are all kind of some of these are more obscure than others, but either way they're all default keys. There's only 17 of or 18 of them. A lot of times this will get you keys, but you can see the Atlanta public transit is smarter than that. So we'll have to go for, if we use the Mifare command, this performs what's called the dark side attack, which is a very cool name. But this is exploiting that pseudo-random number generator I was talking about earlier. And so right now it's trying out a bunch of keys that it thinks are probably close to what the actual encryption key is. It takes a little bit, but not 48 hours, so. Found. Going through 4 different something. I don't know. It's magic. There's not a lot of documentation for this kind of stuff. Unless you want to read academic papers or paywall, but probably get access to. But there we go. We have our encryption key. And we can use this to do HF, MF, RDBK, I think? Or RDBL? Where is it? RDBL. This is for read block. So let's say we want to read the first block of memory, the A section. So we say 0 for the first block, A, and then we give it a key. There we go, we have the first block of data. This might be enough depending on how much data they use to get into something. But let's see, second block, yeah, good, right? Third block, okay, looks like maybe terminated. Fourth block, uh-oh, we can't get into this. I actually don't know because I haven't been able to test, but I assume that this card just uses the first 2 blocks because this is blanked out. But let's, I want to see all the data. So I want to make a full clone of this card. So how do we get into this fourth block? Well, because we have 1 key, we can use that to break into all the other keys, to get all the other keys. Because again, it's all pseudo-random. So if we do that HF, MF, you can see the hard nested attack. There's also the nested attack. I don't know if that'll work on this card, but basically the hard nested was Mifare tried to patch out some of the nested stuff, and the hard nested just kind of negates that, so it'll work most of the time. Let's see, what do we need for this command? We need to give it a block number. Well, we want to get into block number 4 or 5, I don't know. 5. Block number, okay, yeah, that's block 4, but starts from 0. Alright, let's get into oh wait, hold on, I have this wrong. So we're first telling it what the key is. So this is the key for block 0. And then what block we want to get into. So we want to get to block 4 or block 3. We're going to get into the A section, and we don't know the key, so we're just going to go for it. And now it is brute forcing it. It's doing quite a bit of able to, sometimes when it gets a response, there's some like checksum stuff. If you want to read into this again, I'll have links at the end. But it'll basically, there's a way you can kind of predict that if you're on the right track. So you can see brute force time went down, and then we have a key. So this is our new key, and we can use this. I believe probably won't work because it's usually not how this works, but we want to read block 3. It doesn't work. Okay, but trust me, that's a different key than what we started with. You can see that, no, it's not. Oh, let's try this with the next sector. Yeah, okay, that's a different key. So I guess we were able to read the block 3 with that first one. But let's see, block 4. There we go, and now we have block 4 data. And this will probably work for, the next few blocks. There you go, there's block 5, block 6, block 7. Okay, we're getting to the end of our permissions. And again, we could just run that in repeat. So if you had access to a card, someone lost their card on the train or whatever, you could grab the card and take it home and just run this on a script and eventually get all the data and clone it over. So there's a few other cool things you can do with the Proxmark. If we go help again, you can actually, if you want to really get into it, I'll throw the HID card back on there. I'll throw a different card on there, different HID card. If we do an LS search, you can see here's a 35-bit one, the other one was a 26-bit. But we can actually go and see what the raw data is. So we just type data, we can see all the commands available, and we do data plot. Actually see, it'll pop up a window, here we go. And this is actually the waveform that it's generating. And you can kind of see there's the decoded waveform. So if you're working with a weird proprietary protocol, or you're not sure what kind of modulation it uses, and the auto detect isn't working, then you can play around with this. You can see here, I believe this is a frequency shift key, and you can navigate this plot with the arrows. But yeah, you can also just show raw dmod. Or what is it, raw something samples, man raw decode. There you go. This is stream maybe, I don't know, it's been a while since I've messed with this. Bit samples. Okay, well, you get the idea. You can usually hex samples works. You can get the ID out, and you can get the raw data out. So if you're not sure if something's working, those are some cool tools for that. The Proxmark software also supports the smart cards that we mentioned earlier. So I actually have an HID smart card reader that I bought off Amazon for like $10. So if, again, we go help, we can see there's smart card commands and EMV commands. So if we do SC, here's all the smart card commands. I do SC select. I can select my HID smart card reader. And now I have my actual debit card in there because I trust the security and we're not going to poke at it too much. But what we can do is we can say smart card what's info, and this will give us what's called an ATR, or I forgot what that stands for. Answer to return, that's what it is. Basically this tells the reader what kind of card it is, and if you actually take this this hex output, you can find this page online. Let's do that. Screw it. Open link to website URL. Of course. We get this output. We can see how this ATR is broken down, and you can see that it checked against the database and it found it's a Chase Visa debit card, which is what it is. And you can see how all this data is broken down. That's cool if you don't know what a card is using. But I know this is a debit card. This is going to be using EMV. and I'm not going to poke too much at it because it's a pretty secure standard compared to all the low frequency, the other stuff. As it turns out, ISO engineers kind of know what they're doing. But what we can do is we can do EMV test, and this is just checking all the cryptography on the card. So starts off with check the standard AES 3DS encoding. It's just making sure that everything's working properly. All these cards have a certificate, so I don't know if I should share this, but you probably can't do much with it. This is basically a certificate made by probably Visa, where they sign, and the reader will check this and make sure that this works properly. If this doesn't pass, then it knows that you're not a legitimate card and it's not going to do anything. And there's some other certificates depending on what kind of card it is. Again, different, whole bunch of them. There's some hashing tests. Don't know what hashing is. We can do that in a different talk, but you can see also it's testing all the public keys. So this uses that challenge response system. So the reader will send will read the public key, and then it'll encrypt the data and send it over to the card, where the card can then decrypt it. Overall, pretty cool stuff. But if you want to poke around at smart cards, especially ones used for like credentials and stuff that are less secure, this is also a great tool for it. So yeah, a draining bank account. If you can, please tell me, because I can only comprehend so much ISO documentation before my brain stops working. So, but yeah, that's most of what I had for today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. And if not, we'll be in Discord. You can always just @ me at OrigamiHawk. Yeah, thanks for stopping in. All 4 of you. There's 8. Okay. Probably a bit more later on, but yeah. Well, thanks for attending. Again, I'll be in Discord, and we'll see y'all probably next week for our last meeting.